going good. Welcome to the 5th episode of the philiphenry Show. I think it's number 5, right?
Yeah, I think so. Thanks for having me back.
1 and 5. 1 and 5.
Yeah.
Zach Hamilton in the house. I love it. So, today I thought I'd talk about the money side of things.
Okay.
Money making, business. And one of the things that you and I have talked about in the past is that this show is going to be about what I'm passionate about, and that is real estate investing. And so I'd like to just talk to you a little bit about how you would go about doing it and what the difference would be and why would you even choose that path, because, you know, here you are, you're 25, you're starting out your career. You are currently working in Portland as a massage therapist, right?
Yeah.
And there's a level of, I mean, it doesn't take a math genius to figure out that when you're doing something like that, right, when you're a massage therapist working inside of a massage studio, then you are trading an hour of time for what? For a specific amount of money. And that amount of money could depend on what studio you're at, what percentage you get. But the reality is, very quickly you come to the conclusion that whether I work 8 or 10 or 12 hours, there is a very finite cap to that, right?
For sure.
And so I guess when I was around your age and I started in the engineering space and I started working for a company and realizing that inevitably they will pay me enough money to keep me here, but that's it, right? So the people that were actually earning the profit were the owners, the shareholders of that company. And so I had to find a way for me to create financial independence and I needed to get out of that model, right?
Yeah.
And so I guess in your situation, I guess I figured I'll just go through some of the thought process that I had around real estate investing, and I want to give someone like yourself and some of the listeners a little bit of an idea of why they would want to maybe consider the possibility of considering entering into that path and what that might mean for them if they were to continuously do that for 5-10 years,
right,
in terms of their financial independence and their wealth creation. Make sense?
Absolutely. And I'm excited because I truly do not know much about it. So I think it's gonna drum up some interesting questions, and hopefully I definitely know I'm gonna learn some stuff, and hopefully the listeners at home can learn some stuff as well.
Awesome. So. Well, yeah, chime in if something is unclear. But
sure.
So initially, I'll tell you the first instance, and when I realized that working for someone wasn't going to get me where I want to be, when I realized that was growing up in a household of basically 2 working parents. They were working in the conventional way. I had a nurse and I had an engineer as a father, right? My nurse was my mother, engineer father, and I would recall that he was just in a salary situation. So he would get a flat fee, and he would go into the paper mill in St. John, and regardless of how much he worked, it didn't matter because he was salary. So the dollar amount didn't change, right? Mm-hmm. And so I would always wonder, like, okay, there's something you can tell unless you're blind, that there's something called people that are business owners and are wealth creators, and then there are people that are that work for someone else and they earn wages for a living, right?
Right.
And so when I started to realize that in order for me to get financial independence, I couldn't follow that path. I had to do something different. So I just started to read a little bit, and one of the big books that allowed me to even think differently, right? Because if you don't think differently, and if your only belief is to get a really solid education and then go find a good, solid company to work for, if that's your only belief system, then that's what your reality will be, right? So when I read a book called Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki,
yep,
one of the infamous business books, and the 4 quadrants, it allowed me to just even start to think about what that would be like. You know, what his friend's father, who's a wealthy individual, how his mindsets were around business and wealth and having his money work for him. Yet he contrasted that to his current dad, who wanted to get a good education, was always concerned, pinching the pennies, coming from a place of scarcity, always looking at that environment. And then he contrasted the two to figure out what that would be. So anyway, long story short is when we were down in Massachusetts, Steph and I were broke and we're trying to get into this game. And so we ended up buying a 2-unit house in Pawtucket, Rhode Island. And we ended up entering into that thing and staying for 2 years. And when we went to the closing table, and I had to fix up, it was a 2-unit, like 2-bedroom.
And you were living in the house.
And we lived in it, yeah. Okay. But it was like.
So is that like when you're looking at your first property? Is that probably the best bet is to start with the one you live in?
Yeah. So especially like at that point in time, like when we were down there working, a lot of the people that were my age, what they would end up doing is the conventional path, right? Which is. They would go, the houses were really expensive in Boston, Foxborough. So they would go and buy into a $300,000-$400,000 home. So both people are working full time trying to friggin' pay this mortgage.
Right.
They're like, they're trapped right away. They're trapped. So, and I convinced Stephanie that was not the path I wanted to go first. And she, I think ignorance was bliss at the time because she didn't know what that meant. I said, let's get this really, really shitty 2-unit in Pawtucket, Rhode Island, and both units were horrible. Like they were disastrous, but that's why we got it for the price we got it for, right? So then I would come home and we would constantly be working on it in the evenings, and we rented out the upstairs, and that rent basically paid for a good majority of the mortgage, which is pretty sweet. So if you contrast that, my counterpart, same age, buys a home, and he buys it for $400,000. And he's paying that mortgage over time, which is great. I'm, on the other hand, I chose to buy a 2-unit and had one of the units pay for the majority of the rent. So that allowed me to start to save more capital. Sure. 2 years later, we sold that, and leaving the closing table, I remember I looked at Steph and we had this check for like $50,000 cash. And I made, at the time, I think I was making like $45,000 a year. And that was it. I mean, it was just me working, and we had Jacob and Stephanie, and so I was like, I can't. Do you understand? We lived for free for the last 2 years, virtually,
right?
And I just got a check for $50,000 in my hands, right? So that paid off all our student loans, and that just again opened up my eyes to doing that. So I think in a situation like yourself, if you don't have like a lot of obligations, when I say obligations, I mean financial obligations, like right. Children. You've got all those things kind of burdening you down, and you're in a position where you have not done those things yet. So you right. could potentially look at your first home being a multifamily where you live in one, and either your other 1 or 2 or 3 tenants will pay for your mortgage, and you could potentially even be making money monthly and still having a nice place to live.
Right.
And so
are those places pretty abundant in most areas, and like what are you looking for in terms of like starting out? What's like that price range that you're looking for? So you're talking about the first one you had was kind of a dump,
right?
As you said, are you looking for something that? Are you looking for a deal essentially, or is it to depend on like each person's income? Yeah,
I think honestly, it depends on the situation. I think I was at that point. I had a very high appetite for work, and I had low on the resources in terms of money. Right. So I had to figure out a way to make it happen. So that the best opportunity for me was to find something underpriced, but also had some opportunity for improvement that right. would bring sweat equity into the game.
Okay.
And so that's how I did it. Now, doing the math out of the gate, you can easily make some calculations. Like if you're evaluating a multifamily, let's say you have a 2-unit, right? Well, that 2-unit has an income every year, and that income is from rents. And then you take that income and you minus whatever expenses you have, but you don't include the mortgage payments yet. And then what you can do from that is you figure out what's my earnings at the end of the year. If it's bringing in $25,000 a year and my expenses are 10, then I have a $15,000 chunk of cash in my hand, right?
Right.
And from that cash, I have to service the bank with the debt.
Yeah.
So anyway, so if you do that, you could, very quickly you'll find out that if you evaluate anything like a 3 or 4 unit in your situation, you will likely be coming out of that situation with zero money out of your pocket, and you'll be starting to build equity.
Okay.
So it's a great way to, and then what's nice about in your situation, what was great for us to capitalize first is that when you're a first-time home buyer, right? If I were to buy a 4-unit right now, right? And you and I are competing. I'm buying a 4-unit. Well, I own more properties, so I have to come up with 20% down payment, right?
Okay.
In your situation, you would qualify for a first-time home buyer FHA loan or something to that effect. So you would only require 3% down.
Oh, shit.
So all you need to come up with is 3% down payment, and you could enter into up to a 4-unit property. Okay. Anything beyond that is commercial. So you would enter into a 4-unit property for 3% down. And then all of a sudden, you're paying $0 to live there, and you're starting to build equity and build wealth.
Okay.
So yeah. Anyway.
For the majority of like my population,
yeah.
Okay. So I'm talking as a soon to be 26-year-old,
right?
With a 29-year-old about to finish school in the next couple of years.
Yep.
I currently don't have student debt, but she will, and so we're gonna kind of like take that on as a team. Do you go into something like this, like a 4-unit, 2-unit, whatever, with that debt still intact, or is it better to stay in our 1-bedroom, pay off the debt first, and then go into it? So like, because I feel like a lot of people listening that are my age or like in my 20s, like, okay, shit, and this is talking from only one of the 2 people have debt. I'm assuming both people have debt. So what's your thoughts on that?
You combine it. Listen, let's be honest. If like with Steph and I mean, it was a combined student loan debt. So if you're with someone, that debt is your debt. You're kind of you're in the same boat together. So in your case, but yeah, I have a really strong belief that that you need to enter into a multi-unit family. And so, for example, if you guys carry debt in that situation right now, if you just rent a place for $1,000 a month, right, for 12 months, you've just taken $12,000, and that $12,000 is gone forever, right? Okay. So if you ended up contrasting that to getting into a 4-unit or a multi-unit family, number one, you're living rent free, so that you're not paying that $1,000. So that $1,000 that went out the window can now service that student loan debt. But not only that, your building is appreciating, and you're starting to build equity in the property. And I'll explain that quickly, because the best way I can describe it is this. So let's say I have, I'll give you an example. Let's say I have $10,000 cash in my hand, right? So I have $10,000 cash. Instead of I could go out and invest that in stock market and try to make, like 8% maybe in good year, maybe 8%. So at the end of that 12 months, what do I have? From my $10,000 cash in hand, I threw it in the market, and at the end of the year, I have $10,800. Right?
Right.
Okay. Now we're going to contrast that to I'm now Zach, and I'm going to buy a 4-unit house because I only need 3% down. Right. Mm-hmm. So that's pretty good. You could buy a $300,000 house with $10,000. That's not bad.
Okay.
So I've now bought a $300,000 multi-unit family, right? So with that, let's just assume that I'm not paying any rent, right? I'm not going to pay any rent because I'm living in one of the units, right? Because if you weren't, you'd be cash flowing. That meaning that every month you'd have $500 in your pocket. But in this case, you're living there, so let's say you're eating that up because you've decided to stay in one of the units. Well, after that 12 months, let's say that house moderately appreciates at 2%. Moderate. It's a very stable market like Bangor. Well, after that year, 2% of $300,000 is $6,000, right? So it's now, your building's now worth $306,000. Okay. You've also, from the other rents coming in, you've paid the mortgages for 12 months, right? Mm-hmm. So let's just, for shits and giggles, say that you've reduced that by about $5,000. Now the mortgage note is it's $5,000 less than it was before, right? So now you only owe $285 on it, and you bought it for $3. You put $10 down. Right. Now you have $5 in equity. So from that, in that saved 12 months, your $10,000 brought you $6,000 in appreciation, right? Yeah. And you've paid it down $5,000. Now you've got $11,000 that you've earned from that $10,000 investment. That's 1 year. So you are earning over 100% return on that investment, right?
Yeah.
So that's the contrast. So how long would it take you to catch me if you were investing all your free capital in the stock market? How long is it going to take you to catch up to me when I'm making 100% return on it?
Right, a long fucking time.
Especially if you're starting out, because what'll happen is my returns would change. If I had to buy that same 4 unit, I had to put 20% down on that 300 grand property, right?
Right.
So how much did I need? I needed 20, 40. I needed $60,000 of money
just to get started.
Just to get into that same 4 unit. You are a first-time home buyer. You can get in there. And when you're done and when you and your spouse or your girlfriend are ready to get your own home, that's great. You leave that one of the 4 units, you now rent it, your cash flow starts to come in.
Right.
And now you can go buy the house that you want to live in.
So it seems like everyone's doing the reverse.
Yes.
So they're making the mistake of buying the modest first home and then thinking, oh man, like now we have all this extra cash, we should invest it, let's buy some real estate. And then that's the mistake of like making it your second home. So why aren't more, this seems really like a no-brainer, but why is this not like normal?
I don't know, Zach.
Because like this is truly the
first.
first time you've like, I know we kind of talked beforehand. Yeah. We're talking about
but
real estate.
This is specific.
This is really specific. I didn't even think about this because I didn't even know that there was like such a thing as like the first your first home. The fact that you have some incentives with interest and
most definitely.
So like, yeah, why is this?
It's a good question. I honestly, I don't think, I just don't think a lot of people think about it. I mean, if you talk, because again, it's like, I feel like for me, I would never, like if I'm coming out of school, if everybody in my class, as I look around, got a good job, right? And then their first thing is, well, you should buy, you guys are in a serious relationship or you're married or you should buy yourself a house. Because I think people realize that when you start to get serious, renting an apartment, right? Or renting a house or whatever, there are no tax benefits from that. And we didn't even get into that, by the way, Zach. So let's, again, if you happen to choose that four unit house, there are some huge tax benefits that you now get to take advantage of that you would not have had you rented a place. Okay. Or bought your own house, for example. As soon as you start to have a rental portfolio, you and I go to dinner. It's it's an expense. Open up an LLC would be the next step. And then I can, that's a whole nother conversation about how you can now take advantage of the existing tax code the way it is. And that's why, when you're in that environment, there are reasons why there are rules around people who invest in real estate, because there is huge tax benefit from doing it. And if you're not doing it, you don't take advantage of it. And that's what the wealthy like to keep in their back pocket, right?
For sure. So that kind of brings my brain to like the next question, as someone that's completely ignorant to this is, all right, so let's say a couple of years from now, Sarah's working her full-time job, I'm still working my full-time job, and we kind of get into this. So now what are the responsibilities that kind of fall upon us with having, let's make it modest. Let's say we have a 2 unit.
Yep.
So am I essentially taking on another job by having that, like in terms of like maintaining and all that stuff? So can you talk about like the strings attached that might not be as glorious as kind of like
most definitely,
the 100%? Yeah.
And I'll tell you what, a lot of people, because of exactly that question, Zach, a lot of people, because of that, they just avoid it like the plague. Because again, you hear about the story, well, yeah, I'm sorry, renting apartments and all that. Then I'm like, it's like I'm at 2 a.m, I got to come and, fix a guy's leaky toilet or something. I'm sorry, man. My wife is definitely not into it and I'm not into it, So it has the stigma around it. But the reality of it is that, number one, if you are living in the building, right, it's pretty, in terms of proximity, you're not going very far if a problem exists, right? You're living in the house. So, and over the past, I don't know, I guess let's say 10 years, and we manage, upwards of 70 some units. In the past 10 years, I don't, maybe in the early stages, there was some, maybe like 10 o'clock on a Friday night that I had to do something. But I would tell you, like over the 10 years, I could count it on one hand when I've had to do something like that. So it's not something like, this is called passive income. Passive income is the other units within the apartment, they may need some maintenance, they may need some painting and all that. You can either do it yourself and save a few bucks, or there should be plenty of cash flow there in a 4-unit and above to have some of that work done by others.
Right.
If you're busy, I mean, it's really just a phone call. A lot of times you just, I'm sorry, you have some plumbing issues. Okay. Hey, I'll just call a plumber or why don't you call this plumber? I've already got a relationship. They know where to send the bill to. Call this plumber. And that's typically what we do.
So do you think that goes back to what we were talking about before, why people, like, even if they do know this is a thing, that they go to like, oh, I don't want to deal with that, and that might deter them? Is that why this is maybe not such a widely accepted or even known about?
You know, I don't know. I think part of it is that a lot of people just don't want to do the work necessary, or they don't. Sure. There's this like, or maybe it's just not for me. It's just not for me, and they don't question it. They don't go to another layer of questions. Why isn't it for me? I mean, why is it only for these wealthy guys or gals? And that was a big thing for me, is like, you know, understanding that, God damn it, I'm fucking as good as any of these other clowns that are doing it. And why is it? They were born on this earth. Let's do it, man. If this guy's wrong, why is it that he can own a portfolio of real estate investments and have financial wealth for his family, and I can't because I didn't come from that area, or I wasn't born in Cape Cod, or I wasn't from that area of town. Mm-hmm. And that's, I think, so in my opinion, Zach, it's all yourself. It's all mindset stuff that creates this roadblock for people to even think that they could do that. Oh, apartment rentals. Yeah, sorry, man. I don't know about that. It's just right away. It's like it clicks. Like, no, that's not for me, man. I don't know anything about that. That's a different world. Well, get to know about it. Learn about it. Because in terms of wealth creation in North America, we are in a position where we have that opportunity. Banks will lend you money. People have capital. If you've got a good business idea, it's already proven. All the math formulas are there. It's not like you're having to come up with some new product like the iPhone and then find a way to bring it to market and market the shit out of stuff. And is there even a demand there? We're talking about real estate. It's there. Right. It's already revenues coming in. You just got to be able to do some math equations.
Okay. And so is this something that you should be considering, especially as a young man and as a young couple? Like, just now we're both getting ready to start working full time as a team and start building some wealth. Obviously, get rid of the debt first and building some wealth. Would you advise, like, obviously a more diverse portfolio is best, but I mean, in my head, when I was reading all these books like Rich Dad Poor Dad, I was thinking more of like mutual funds and stocks, bonds, and all that stuff. But real estate was something that seemed a little out of reach for me. Like, it seemed like I don't know if I'll even have the wealth to deal with that. Right. But after talking here, is like, do you recommend putting more effort and time and money into real estate? Because in my brain, the math seems to be working out better than waiting for mutual funds to accrue interest over time.
It's a good question, and actually something I've toyed around with over the years. Because as I was working in my engineering role, I would start a 401k, right?
Right.
And my 401k had different mutual funds and funds that you could allocate a piece of that 401k in, right? And so over the years, as I started to make these investments in real estate, quickly I started to realize that why the fuck am I having 25 G's or 50 G's sitting in a 401k making 8%? The management fees are nickel and diming you to death.
Right.
All these fund managers are slicing pieces of your pie off year after year, and they're putting it into their own pockets, right? At these big fund companies. So I said, and when I explained to you the returns that you get on real estate with appreciation, cash flow, and tax code and tax deductions, my returns on my real estate adventures are 10x that of a 401k. So I slowed down that whole train, and I started to invest in myself. So instead of people say, take 10%, put it in your 401k. That's great. How about take 10% and put it in a capital fund where you can start to use that and invest in real estate? Because the magic with investing in real estate is leveraging the bank's money. That's where you get the math of three. That's where you get a math of I only have $10,000 cash, but if it's your first house, you can buy up to a $300,000 home. That means when a $300,000 home only appreciates by 2%, that's $6,000 of appreciation you got. Whereas, if you could only buy $100,000 of home, it's only $2,000. So that all that bank money that you're leveraging has allowed you to get the benefits of that. So that's really the key, is leveraging the bank's money, but also taking advantage of cash flow and tax code stuff. And I think the other thing that young folks probably just don't think about is the fact that capital is available. So what I would say to someone like yourself is, because I don't know, like for me, I'd be like 10 grand. Okay, yeah, 10 grand is not a lot of money. Well, 10 grand is not a lot of money, Phil, for someone who's 43 and has gray hair. Right. By the way, it's not a lot of gray hair. It's a little bit, but
it's a trendy amount.
It's a trendy amount. Thank you. It's like a Richard Gere amount of gray hair. Yeah. But 10 grand when you're coming out of school and you have
that's a lot of money.
And you have you have car payment, you have, however, so that's when you have to be, because wealth creation is about idea creation. Money is just a commodity. Cash is a commodity. If you don't pair that up with human capital, it's not worth anything. So that's where you get to be creative and you say, okay, I don't have 10 grand, right? However, I do know that I can find a multi-unit in Portland that cash flows. Because I'll spend an evening grabbing a bunch of stuff from the MLS and run some numbers once I know the formula, and then I can just say, hey Phil, anybody, just pull it together. Say, listen, how about this? I'll give you 25% equity in this thing, just so I can get into this thing, and I'll manage it all. I'll run it. I'll take care of all the problems. You outright own 25% just by giving me the 10 grand. Hey, that's a no-brainer. Right. I give you 10 grand and you're going to do all the work. But not only are you going to be able to now enter into a 4-unit house that's worth 300 grand, and you basically, what did you bring? Zero.
Yeah.
You got $0 in this game, but I'm like, shit, man, 25% equity?
Yeah.
You own 75% of house.
The math is looking real good.
Yeah. I mean, seriously, it's
yeah.
So those are the things that you just got to think about. And until you think that it's possible and that you're worth it, you won't approach anybody with that confidence that you need, because you got to have the confidence, and confidence comes from competence. Mm-hmm. Right. So if you're coming to me for money, Zach, and you don't understand the formulas of real estate, and you come to me and say, hey, Phil, I found a 4-unit. It looks pretty cool. It's in a good part of town. And be like, okay, what's the net operating income of it? How's it look? What are the financials of it? Oh, I don't know. Pretty good, I guess. I would, right away, I'm not going to give you the money, because you don't have the confidence nor the competence for me to make sure that if I'm going to give you that capital, it's going to be taken care of.
Right.
So you just got to do your homework, but that's it, man. If you, in 10 years, again, wealth creation in less than 10 years is possible for you to you don't have to work anymore if you do it right in 10 years.
Yeah. And
start to add to that portfolio. And the other thing is about pyramiding your investments, So when you buy your first one, right? That is the key. That's the fork in the road for a guy like you, Zach. A fork in the road is entering into that now. And so what will happen is, in 3 years, when you're out of school and so on and so forth, you will have 3 years of payments behind you. Meaning that now you have, let's just say you have $40,000 worth of equity in this home that you bought. You've paid $0 rent every month. You have 30 grand. Now you can borrow $30,000 worth of money to go get the next one.
Right.
Right. And that's called pyramiding your investments. And then, so you're just leveraging all the equity that you currently have to get the next one. And then that's going to happen again. And then it happens again, until you start to see that over 5 years, you can start to build a lot of equity. And now you have a lot of money that you can move around. So instead of buying a $300,000 building, you have enough equity. You have $200,000 in equity. So now if you have $200,000, I can buy something worth $1 million. And when $1 million property appreciates by 2%, it's not bad.
Yeah.
Right?
No kidding.
And so that's the math. That's how the math works. So the key is you gotta act. You gotta identify a property, and then you gotta act on it. And if your spouse or significant other is a little bit concerned about it, hey man, let me know. Email me.
Yeah.
philiphenry at canuck-investments.com. I think it's a huge decision that can change people's lives for the better, for sure. Yeah.
Well, I look forward to like kind of diving more into that, and hopefully in future episodes we'll maybe even get even more specific with these kind of examples.
Yeah. No, I think that'd be good. I think for me, it's like I'm a visual guy, so even talking through this, I mean, I like to see like numbers and for me, that's when I really understood the formulas, when I saw it on paper and I said, you're right. Saying that all these guys that tell you to invest in shares and mutual funds and stocks, if I make 10% here, you're telling me if I invest in real estate, cash flow real estate, multifamily real estate, I can make like 60% to 100% returns?
Right.
Oh man, it would take me 6 lifetimes to earn the same amount of money.
Exactly.
It's 6x. So yeah, and if for anyone that has questions, or I mean, I'm available to chat through email. Like I said, my website canuck-investments.com. We rent, we help people buy, sell real estate in Bangor, Maine. So contact us, reach out, and thanks again, Zach, for coming in here and listening to me spout off about real estate.
No, that was perfect. Thanks for having me again.
Awesome. Okay, thanks.
Take care, guys.
Yeah.